Hello, welcome to From Caracas. I'm Laura Prada. In this opportunity, we'll be talking with Foad Izadi. He's a professor from Iran. He's in Venezuela currently assisting at the anti-imperialist meeting being held here. And with him, we are going to approach what is happening today in Iran, in the Middle East, and how this covers, how this can be understood by the Western Hemisphere and all the social movements here. How can we understand the response that Iran have been making to the U.S. threats recently thrown upon them? Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for the invitation.
How can you explain to us that we are not living in the Middle East, that we are not that we are receiving both sides of sometimes a more powerful side version of the facts that are happening? How can we understand it? How can we acknowledge and be certain of what is really happening in Iran today?
Well, you are not in the Middle East, but you have been affected by the aggressive U.S. foreign policy as much as Iran, if not more. Historically, countries of Latin America have been experiencing U.S. imperialism, and in more recent decades, the countries in the Middle East have had the same problem. But the practices of U.S. imperialism is similar. They assassinated someone like Che Guevara many years ago in Latin America, and they assassinated an Iranian general about 2 weeks ago. And the result of that assassination was similar to what happened to Che Guevara. Che Guevara became more popular after his assassination. He became more famous after his assassination. And General Soleimani now, after the terrorist act of the United States, after U.S. engaged in an act of state terrorism, became quite popular. Yesterday, I was in Caracas and I saw people carrying his pictures. Mm-hmm. So I think what the U.S. has done was to make a martyr out of him, the same way they did with Che Guevara. And in Iran 2 weeks ago, when they brought his body back from Iraq, millions of people showed up in the streets commemorating him. He was on an official visit to Iraq. Iraq was mediating between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and he was carrying an official letter from Iran. He was supposed to meet the Iraqi prime minister the day that he was assassinated. When he came to the airport, an Iraqi general came to welcome him, and the United States killed both of them. So I think this type of legal actions by the United States, whether they have it against people of Venezuela or when they have it against people of Iran, are similar. That's why Iranian people and people in Venezuela have similar goals. One goal is to resist this type of pressure, and that's why there's this sense of friendship and unity and solidarity that exists between two countries.
The reaction of Iran to the assassination of General Soleimani was to respond in the same way. They throw bombs, missiles on a U.S. base in Iraq. The United States have then thrown threats again upon Iran. I will quote the U.S. Special Envoy to Iran, Brian Hook. He said, "If Ghani follows the same path of killing Americans, then he will meet the same fate as Soleimani." That's referring to Ismail Ghani, the new head of the Quds Force and of the unit of the Revolutionary Guard. Why throw threats upon Iran when they just reacted as they should?
This is U.S. foreign policy. They understand the use of force only. They use force to achieve foreign policy goals illegally. Assassinating an official of a foreign country is against United Nations Charter. If you want to use force against another country, you need to get permission from the UN the UN Security Council. And obviously the United States did not have any permission from the UN Security Council to kill an Iranian official on foreign soil, on Iraqi soil. And they continue this practice of threats. The UN Charter says threat or use of force is illegal unless they get permission from the Security Council, and the US did not have that permission, and they continue this type of illegal practice. The Iranian government response was something that a lot of people expected, and in fact this was the first time a government decided to respond officially and attacked a US base because United States used that base to kill the general and engage in an act of war. I think we are facing difficult times in Iran-US relations. Iran is obviously not going to follow US foreign policy, and the US policy towards Iran has failed. The United States wanted to overthrow the Iranian government, the same thing they did in 1953, and they seem not to learn anything in the many decades that have passed since that time. They failed. The Iranian government has not been overthrown. They wanted to get more concessions out of Iran. That policy also failed because they're losing the concessions they got under the nuclear agreement. And some people in Washington thought attacking Iran would be easy. Iran's response to General Soleimani's assassination shows that Iran has the capability and the willingness to fight back. So the idea of attacking Iran and not getting anything in response is a false premise. So overall, I think the Trump administration policy is failing, and the sooner they realize that, it's going to be better for the Iranian people and the American people at the same time.
Hassan Rouhani said at the 72nd UN National Assembly period of session, he said, I will quote, "We are meticulous guardians for a world free from freedom." And he called also to quit imposing sanctions and end extremism. The world will not have a better friend than Iran if peace is what you seek. What can we read out of those words?
You know, Iran has not attacked any country in the last 200 years. The last time Iran engaged in some sort of military activity against a neighbor or some other country was more than 200 years ago. Iran has been trying to be peaceful. Iran tried to have better relations with the United States with the nuclear agreement. And you saw what the Trump administration did. They left the agreement without any proper justification at the time that they even acknowledged that Iran was following the agreement. So this is a problem that we have with the United States. And I think the more people realize what the US is doing, the better it's going to be. Unfortunately, we have some countries in Latin America that try to follow the United States, and they're making a big mistake. I think what needs to happen, given the history of US imperialism in Latin America, is to have a united front. People in Iran, with people in Venezuela, and other freedom-loving people throughout the Latin American countries, to fight this type of oppression that the US is exercising. And having networks of people who oppose this type of illegal activities of the United States government is going to be very crucial. This linkage, this unity is going to be important because the United States foreign policy wants to divide people. That old slogan of divide and rule. So they want Latin American countries to be fighting each other. They want Middle Eastern countries to be fighting each other so they can exercise their illegal foreign policy and illegal activities easier.
What do they pursue when they are trying to divide, to put that much pressure on countries in Latin America and in the Middle East, and specifically with Iran? Because one of the request Iran is making after the assassination of Soleimani is that United States gets out of the Middle East. Why?
Because US presence in the Middle East has brought nothing but death and destruction. Even President Trump talked about liking oil when he said, originally he said that he wants to leave Syria, then he said he likes oil and he's going to stay and take over the oil fields. In Iraq, when the Obama administration wanted to leave Iraq. He opposed Obama administration leaving Iraq, and he was saying that keep the oil. And he says he likes oil. And we understand, since he repeats that sentence a lot, that I like oil, we understand that he likes oil. But the US is an energy-rich country. He should stay with American oil. He shouldn't be looking to take over Iraqi oil or Syrian oil or Venezuelan oil or Iranian oil. The oil of these countries belong to the people of these countries, not the United States. And this is the policy of the US government. Because they like oil, they think that they should take over countries. You saw what happened with the Trump administration when John Bolton was national security advisor. He talked about why American oil companies are not present in Venezuela. Well, it's the decision of the Venezuelan government to see whether they want to have American oil companies participating in oil projects or not. It's not a decision of John Bolton or the US government, and they don't respect the country's sovereignty, and that's a problem we have in Middle East. This is a problem you have in Latin America.
Then we see spaces like the one that is being held in Venezuela, an anti-imperialist meeting, a gathering with social movements that are denouncing these intentions from United States to become the sole owner of the resources of the countries. Why spaces like this one set a platform to send out the message from the countries that are suffering invasions, that are suffering wars, that are suffering this pressure?
You know, the conference that was held since Wednesday in Caracas is very important. The organizers invited professors, activists, individuals that have influence in their own countries. And their presence was first a show of solidarity with the Venezuelan people against US imperialism. It was very educational for people who participated. You had good speakers talking about US foreign policy, talking about imperialism, talking about resistance, talking about solidarity that needs to exist among the people who are suffering from US foreign policy. And then when panels finish, people get to meet each other. So I met people from all over the world that were present in the conference, and they basically had a similar message, that resisting the US pressure is the only way. Talking to US government officials is not really helpful. We experienced that with the nuclear agreement. It took 2 years to talk to US government to reach that agreement. And an agreement was reached. And at the end of the day, the US just left the agreement because a new government existed. So in US, you had a peaceful transfer of power. There was no coup d'etat in US. Just having one government, the Obama administration, accept an agreement, and then the Trump administration leaving the agreement is not the way it's supposed to be. You know, you need to have consistency when it comes to governments. So that's a sign that you cannot trust the United States government, and talking to US is not really going to be useful.
But when we talk about the nuclear deal, this pact made by Iran and United States and some other big countries, allies from the United States in Europe specifically, Iran has stated that they will use nuclear energy in a peaceful and supervised by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Why, if there's this agreement with the Nuclear Energy Agency and with these countries, why United States is withdrawing from that deal? Why, which interest do they have in leaving that accord like that? Just leave it.
You know, they want to overthrow the Iranian government.
Is that a way to overthrow it?
Not really, because it's not really working out. The same way they want to overthrow the Venezuelan government. The same way they had a coup d'etat in Bolivia just recently. The same way they have threatened to attack Latin American governments and Middle Eastern governments that don't want to be following US foreign policy. So that's the reason. They thought that they would get out of the agreement. They have something called maximum pressure campaign. So exercise maximum pressure campaign and then achieve that foreign policy goal. But that is failing. And as you know, Iran is the most inspected country when it comes to its nuclear program. It's a peaceful nuclear program. The International Atomic Energy Agency is on the ground in Iran all the time, watching Iranian nuclear facilities 24 hours a day, 70 days a week, 365 days a year. Iran is adopting the additional protocol of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and going beyond that. So there is no doubt that Iran is not developing anything that leads to a nuclear weapon, because Iran is the most watched country when it comes to its nuclear program. So why would the US leave such a deal that has this level of scrutiny and this level of watching?
And compromise.
And compromise all the concessions they got out of Iran. Why would they do that? They thought that they can leave the deal, pressure Iran, overthrow the Iranian government. But the news is that the people who were thinking about these lines, people like John Bolton, they already left the US government, but Iran is still there. So this shows the policy is not really working out. The policy of overthrowing the Iranian government is not working out. The policy of overthrowing the Venezuelan government is not really working out. So sooner or later, the US government needs to realize that its foreign policy is a miserable failure.
Is this United States government incapable of negotiating, of sitting on a table and negotiate and have a proper dialogue?
You know, there is a difference between talk and negotiations. Negotiations means there is a give and take. So you get something and you give up something.
Is United States
is
not in the disposition of giving in that?
No, they are not interested in negotiations. They are interested in talking. And what they mean by talking is that we dictate to you what you need to do and you listen to us. This is how they operate. Obviously, Iran is not going to do that. I don't think Venezuela is going to do that. And once they talk and they sort of give orders, if you don't listen to them, then they not only want to change the country's foreign policy, they want to change the internal power structure and power arrangements of that country. Because they say that if the current government did not listen to us, we need to sanction that government, we need to overthrow that government. We cannot trust the people who are leading that country, because if we give them some concession, if we have some sanctions removed, then these people become stronger, and we don't want that.
Is that Trump's fear when he says that Iran is too good at negotiating?
That's the problem that he has, because he realizes that through negotiations, you need to have give and take. And since they want to overthrow the government, they don't want to have negotiations. And the history has shown that if they negotiate properly, they can achieve some of their foreign policy goals. But they don't want to achieve some of their foreign policy goals. They want to achieve all of their foreign policy goals. That's why they're imperialists. Imperialists don't want to respect the other side properly. They want to get rid of the other side improperly. And that's what they are doing, and they're failing.
Why promoting, supporting, reinforcing that the Middle East is kept under war, under so much pressure that the people are being killed? Why is United States so interested in that war prevails in one region and then also take out the resources from there?
Well, one is taking out the resources, as President Trump says that they like oil. The second issue that the US has is Israel. They want to use Israel to put pressure on the people who live in that part of the world. And as you know, they have a history of violating Palestinian rights. They have a history of violating the rights of people in Lebanon and in Jordan and in Egypt and the whole Middle East. Unfortunately, we have this problem of the Israeli lobby in the United States that generally controls the US policy in the Middle East. And one reason they continue these policies that have failed is because of the pressure they get from the Israeli lobby. And this is how the US political system works. Money influence in politics is quite extensive, and so the Israeli lobby is good at influencing American politicians and financing their campaigns and then getting results out of the money that they give to American politicians. And this is a problem that the U.S. has. You know, they have this election coming up, and one thing that candidates like Bernie Sanders complain about is the fact that the influence of money in politics is quite extensive, and candidates that don't want to accept this lobby money is generally in a disadvantageous position. And if the policies had succeeded, then you would expect for these policies to continue. The problem that the U.S. has is that its policies fail, and they still keep the failed policies at the same level. And this is a problem for the American people. And this is an English show. I'm sure you have some Americans that are watching. I think they have a responsibility to affect the policies that are hurting United States more than they're hurting other people. Because as President Trump said, they spent over $7 trillion in different wars in the Middle East, and they did not achieve anything. They have one problem that they have in the Middle East, that they're supporting dictatorships. We have these kingdoms that know nothing about democracy, know nothing about elections, know nothing about human rights, and the US government is helping them because they get money out of these countries. So they question the democracy in Venezuela, and they support the most oppressive dictators in the Middle East. So this is a sign for you that they're not interested in democracy. They're interested in oil, they're interested in Israel, they're interested in divide and conquer, they're interested in imperialism. That's why the anti-imperialism conference is important, because when you see people from different parts of the world coming, participating, sharing similar stories, it is an indication that the policies are not having a result, and having solidarity among anti-imperialist countries and anti-imperialist people is going to be important. Having solidarity among countries that are sanctioned by the United States is going to be very important.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
For sharing your time here with us from Caracas to bring us closer to the Iranian reality and to understand what is happening today there and the threats that we are facing in the world today. Thank you very much for being with us today here from Caracas. In this opportunity, we spoke about Iran, about why imperialism is so interested in controlling resources from countries that fight them back. Thank you for being with us. Until next time.